think we're ready. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the December meeting of the Whatcom County Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force and Law and Justice Council. As usual, we start with our land acknowledgement statement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. I'll call this meeting to order, joined with my fellow co-chair, Jack Hovenier. I want to welcome Lieutenant Monson sitting in for Chief Mertzig from the Bellingham Police Department. I want to welcome Raylene King and Stephanie Kraft from the Superior Court Administration. And we'll have you two talk a little bit about your positions later on in the agenda. It's really nice to have you here. And welcome Lieutenant Caleb Erickson in his new role as Corrections Chief. I hope I'm not forgetting to acknowledge anyone else. And
Stephen?
Yes.
Don't see them here, but obviously, and Jill made the note too, this would have been Mayor Fleetwood and Sheriff Elko's last meeting. And so we acknowledge, oh, go ahead, Jill, I see your hand up.
We have one attendee just labeled Seth. Mayor Fleetwood, if that's you, please speak up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I guess I'm an attendee, so I can't be seen, but I'm in attendance, Jack.
Also, Seth or Mayor Fleetwood, I want to thank you. Thank you for all of your efforts with this task force, with the larger issues pertaining to the task force, and you've been an incredible advocate for the incarceration reduction that this group is trying to do. And thank you so much for your efforts. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
Yep. And we'll acknowledge, is it, I don't know the correct term, Sheriff-elect Tanksley, congratulations. We look forward, the task force looks forward to working with you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And that is the correct term, Jack.
I thought so, but you know, I'm getting older. So, and sheriff to be didn't sound right.
So speaking of getting older, I've forgotten, are you taking the calendar, Jack?
No, I thought you were,
Okay.
can or you can. Either one.
No, I got it. So the first item on the agenda is approving our 2024 calendars for both the whole task force and for the committees. And Jill included proposed draft in the packet. And Jill, do you want to just put that back up on the screen for a moment so people can look at it if they hadn't? Thank you. If you could squeeze that down a little bit. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So this is what we have. Does anybody see any problems, objections, want to propose any changes? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adopt this as our calendar for 2024, realizing, of course, that we can make changes as we go through the year.
So moved.
I think I heard a motion from Councilmember Hamill to adopt the calendars. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mayor Cortice. Any discussion? Anyone opposed to the calendar that's been moved for approval. Then I'll just note there are no objections. It's adopted by acclamation. Jack, you want to take the year-end report?
Yeah, thank you. Most of you have seen this before, but not everyone. So the task force does 2 reports a year to the county council. This is historically the one that's a little more abbreviated under the ordinance that established the task force. We do both of these reports. These drafts have been around for a little while. Steering committee recommends that these be adopted. Pardon me, that this report be adopted. Of note, I think, Raylene, I think it was you that brought it up. We have some people that are listed at the beginning in the positions they had for the majority of the time to report. So, for example, Raylene King is listed as blank court administrator, and I believe the way that was ultimately handled is later in the report you'll see that a kind of a summary of some of the changes are itemized in there. So I think that probably addresses something that came up at steering. We had a little more transition than usual. Jill, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I also added to the top of the member list that note that it is the 2023 membership.
Oh, perfect. So, and although there might be a little bit of shift within 2023, I don't think anyone who's reading it closely would be confused, but there was an effort to make note of that. And, you know, for those that have been at the task force for a while, many of the people who were in one position are now in a different position or have been, I guess in some cases you'd call it promoted or have more responsibilities. And we wanted to have those individuals reading the report be clear on who's doing what. Beyond that, a somewhat minor thing, I know that Perry had a couple of changes that were implemented. I think Perry is related particularly to the and Beacon Center of Hope. And I think it's ready to go. So, but before I entertain the motion to approve it, I see Sheriff Tanksley's hand up. And go ahead, Tank.
So right now, I represent the small city chiefs. So that position is going to need to be replaced. And then on another note, just to let everyone know, I do need to leave at 9:45.
Great. Well, thank you for being here today. And we will, thank you for the reminder that needs to be done. Mayor Cortez.
And the small city group has appointed Chief Turner from Ferndale to fill Tank's position. And we're also looking to fill the municipal court rep, and we're looking to fill the city councilor rep. And we have some names, and we meet tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have those filled out before the end of the week.
So you're trying to replace the role held by Raylene King. And
correct. Yep.
Good luck filling those shoes. No, I'm sure you will. But they've both been excellent, and we appreciate both their efforts.
Yeah,
and thank you.
And then we've never had a small city councilor that was interested, and now through an email that went out last week, we have 2 that might be interested. So we will work our way through that.
Great, thank you so much.
And I too have to leave at 9:45 today. So not because I'm not enjoying your company, but I will have another meeting.
All right. Well, and this is one of the advantages of Zoom. I think if we were all trying to be together, our attendance would certainly be smaller. So, although we could have donuts and coffee and stuff. So. All right. Anything else? All right. Would someone like to please make a motion to approve the Whatcom County Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force 2023 year-end report?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Arlene. And we have a second?
Second,
Was that Rick Cortex?
it was Mr. Mowry.
Oh, Mr. Mowry. Okay, sorry. My Zoom did the wrong thing. I couldn't tell. All right. Do we have any discussion or questions about this? All right. The way I typically do decision-making, Zoom's a little weird. I'll ask everyone in favor to say aye or raise their hand, and then I will make space for abstentions and anybody opposed. Yes, Maya.
Crazy.
Oh, are we voting? Oh, you guys are already voting? Okay, cool. I'm sorry. Okay, all in favor of approving, please signify with a raised hand in Zoom or with your hand. Okay, I see lots of raised hands. You can put your hands down. Does anyone want to be noted as an abstention? see none. And anyone opposed? I see none. So that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And Stephen, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jack. The next item on the agenda has to do with an update and a discussion, if appropriate, on the status of public defense staffing and assigned counsel staffing in the light of caseload challenges. This is a subject that's been part of conversations in a couple of committees, and the steering committee had a presentation on this as well and thought it important to bring this to the whole task force. Maya and Raylene, this is for you, and thank you very much for the background materials you forwarded us with the packet. Maya, you want to take it?
Thanks for inviting me to speak. So I know probably everybody whose name appears here, but maybe there's people from the public watching, and I'm Maya Vanya. I'm Chief Deputy Public Defender for Whatcom County. So I want to explain how the new National Public Defense Workload Study results may impact our local standards for indigent defense. If the Supreme Court of Washington adopts new standards based on the workload study, there will be dramatic changes to the number of cases a defender can accept, and it will have significant effects on funding of public defense. And along with coming changes to the standards, we're dealing with a nationwide, but certainly acute locally, as Raylene will get into, shortage of public defenders. Rate of pay and workload are drivers for this shortage, and we're working hard to recruit and retain qualified attorneys, both in my office and at the Office of Assigned Counsel, which Raylene is managing. The National Public Defense Workload Study, I think there's a link in your materials, but it's a 186-page report, so I don't expect anyone to really look at that. It examines the 50-year-old guidelines that are used to estimate the maximum number of cases a defense attorney should handle in a year. And the study was put together by the RAND Corporation, the National Center for State Courts, and the American Bar Association. This was published just on September 12th, and it details how many hours assistant public defenders should spend on 11 specific types of cases in order to provide reasonably effective representation. It's important for this body to understand the National Public Defense Workload Study because defenders' work has a significant impact on incarceration. Public defenders are a vital part of our criminal legal system, based around the idea that people are innocent until proven guilty, and that anyone accused of a crime is entitled to a public defender if they can't afford to hire one on their own. The problem we face is that most public defense attorneys are handling far too many cases each year, making it extremely difficult for them to provide adequate legal representation to people accused of crimes. Defense attorneys handling cases involving complex forensic data and technology are being asked to juggle the same number of clients as their predecessors in the 1970s, but things have changed a lot. Excessive caseloads also delay everything throughout the criminal legal system, impacting defendants, victims, families, our whole community. As a defender, we're dealing with people's lives, and it is a hard job. I love it. I think that most of my staff would say that they love it, but it is hard. And the expectations on public defenders are shown by this workload study to be unreasonable. As an aside, I kind of in preparing this was thinking about lead and what is considered a reasonable open caseload for the behavioral health specialists who work with lead members. I promise they do not come even close to approaching the numbers of clients a felony public defender is expected to handle at any given time. We're talking 70 to 100 open cases or clients at a time for felony defenders. Public defenders are currently working under standards that were adopted by our Washington Supreme Court in 2012. And in broad strokes, our current standards allow one full-time defender to accept 150 felony cases or 400 misdemeanors or 250 juvenile cases in a 12-month period. Mixed caseloads where someone handles both adult and juvenile felony or juvenile court cases, that becomes a little complicated. We adjust for that. And we do have one lawyer who kind of splits time. The current statewide standards do not distinguish between different types of felonies. So under the current state standards, it would be ridiculous, but one attorney could technically be assigned 150 homicides in a 12-month period. The national study delineates different categories of felony offenses, and I'll show you a chart from there a little later. But here we don't differentiate between type of felony statewide. In 2020, Whatcom County, like many counties throughout the state had already done, adopted a case weighting system. So that is sort of layered on our statewide standards. Under our case weighting policy, a homicide is 3 case credits, whereas a less serious felony like a burglary second is 1 case credit. So in Whatcom County, one attorney could be assigned 50 homicides in a 12-month period. Now that would never happen, but I'm just trying to explain how the state standards and case weighting policy work together in Whatcom County. And our case weighting policy has provided some small amount of relief, but nothing like what the National Workload Study sets out. Whatcom County having a case weighting policy will help us in our future adjustment to the new standards, because we already recognize that 150 serious felonies would be an unreasonable caseload. What the National Workload Study reveals is that our attempt to give additional case credits for serious felony cases is woefully inadequate. Under Washington standards and our local case weighting policy, a defender is to devote an average of just 12 hours to each felony case credit. So in Whatcom County, about 36 hours of attorney time should be spent on a homicide. And there's no way that that's even close to accurate. Much, much more time is spent on that type of case. So under the National Workload Study, 260 hours of attorney work time is expected on a single homicide case. That's 36 hours compared to 260 hours. Under the national study, defenders should devote 35 hours of work to each low-level felony case, not 12. 173 hours to a sex case, not 24 or 36, and 297 hours to a life without parole or third strike case, not 36 hours. So right now, 36 hours of work is the most we give for even our most serious cases. That's felonies, but we also have to just look at least at misdemeanors, because they're also going to be impacted district court cases as well. For misdemeanors, our current standard allows 4.5 hours for each case, but the workload study requires 22.3 hours for high-level misdemeanors and 13.9 for low-level misdemeanor cases. So 3 to 5 times as much attorney work time should be spent defending misdemeanors. So these numbers are kind of shocking. They are many times greater, and they mean that defenders have been, no surprise to me, grossly overworked, and the quality of defense suffers. And these new numbers mean that far more public defenders will be needed to handle the same number of cases filed by the state. I sent a chart to Jill. I'm going to have her put it up for you guys to see. And this is pulled from the study, and it shows the hours per case applied just to felonies. So you can see that on the far left is the categorization of the felony types. In the center column is the hours that should be devoted, attorney hours that should be devoted to that type of case. And then on the right, it lists the annual caseload standard. So it suggests that if you had a caseload of only felony high murder, you would only be able to accept 8 cases in 1 year. There's a lot of tricky elements to adapting and implementing new standards in Washington based on this study that you're seeing. For one, this study assumes that public defenders have 2,080 hours of available for casework each year, and that's 40 hours a week, 52 hours a year for case-related work. And you know, that estimate is not realistic because it doesn't factor in at all time off. And we know everyone has paid time off, administrative work to do, professional development that's required to maintain your license. So after you reduce the 2080 hour year, it looks more like 1650 or 1800 hours of work that can be devoted to case related time. So in reality, the number of cases an attorney could accept under the National Workload Study would be even lower. But setting that aside, I read an article last week that said that to meet the new national standards for workloads, the Maryland Office of the Public Defender calculated in its 2023 annual report, it would need to increase the number of attorneys who represent clients in adult criminal cases alone by more than threefold. And that's not even counting the, like assistant public defenders in specialized divisions or paralegals, investigators, behavioral health specialists, that legal assistants, all of which support staff, of course, are required. So here in Washington, within the last month, the Supreme Court, our Supreme Court, asked the State Bar Council on Public Defense to send the Supreme Court recommendations for new standards based on this national workload study. And this week, the Council on Public Defense is meeting with several Supreme Court justices to discuss exactly what they're looking for in terms of recommendations. We expect the Supreme Court is looking for an implementation plan, ideas on how the standards can be enforced. And it looks like the Council on Public Defense will recommend an implementation plan for new Washington standards that give a few years for communities to fully shift into these new requirements. Because I think, of course, the big question is how will communities pay for the large increase in public defenders required by new standards? Well, the governor just added an additional $10 million in funding to the State Office of Public Defense in his supplemental budget recommendation. These monies would be distributed statewide, but that is a drop in the bucket. We know that WASAC, the Washington State Association of Counties, has brought a lawsuit against the state, basically saying, hey, state, you pay for and administer public defense or give counties the funding to do it. So that's one approach. And then I'm aware of Senator Torres, who's a Republican in the 15th legislative district. She's proposed a bill that would increase state funding of public defense over 5 years to account for 50% of the budgeted need for public defense. So state level government is aware of a serious lack of defenders that's currently causing defendants in Yakima, Benton, and even here in Whatcom County to go unrepresented. New standards based on the workload study will make this situation even more stark. Many more public defenders will be required, and that will take money to recruit, hire, and retain them all. We're very grateful that our county council just approved 7 new positions for the public defender's office to begin in January. 4 attorneys, 1 investigator, 1 behavioral health specialist, and 1 legal assistant. This additional staff will hopefully allow us to accept the incoming flow of cases within the current state standards. But we need to continue reinforcing the number of public defenders so we're not blindsided when new standards are adopted by the Supreme Court, because they are coming. King County is looking to take a proactive approach. There, the public defender is already asking their county council to pass an ordinance to implement a version of the new standards in advance of the Supreme Court's adoption. As a step towards compliance with the National Workload Study, they're seeking to adopt the broadest standard for felonies, which you'll see is felony low, 35 hours per case, 59 cases per year. And this would be like a step towards compliance that would be gradual, more gradual, and pose the least disruptive impact on their public defense office and criminal legal system entities. So in the year, what King County is suggesting is that in the rolling year beginning July 1st of 2024, they'll implement the new 59 case limit without regard to the type of felony. So instead of 150 as it is now, they drop it to 59, anticipating that as they get compliance with the number 59, they will eventually be implementing these other numbers that allow more time to be devoted to the most serious types of cases. In my office, statistics are not great. We need a full-time data person tracking criminal legal system numbers, and I know the county is working on this in its 2025, 2026 budget. I look forward to working with that person. Our case management system that we have internally is called Defender Data. It's like how we process and look at our case files, and we can run some reports on it. But the data going in, I can't really attest to the complete accuracy of this, but our data shows that from January 1st until December 15th, so last Friday, most of 2023, we were assigned 1,537 felony cases. And now some of those cases may have later gone out as a conflict. Again, I can't give the greatest numbers, but if that were accurate, we would need 26 attorneys to handle that number of cases if we adopted, like King County is proposing, only the broadest standard for felony cases and used the 2080 work hours figure, which we know is not accurate. But trying to make the least dramatic shift, 26 attorneys, but with our new hires, we will have 16.75 attorneys. So we would need 10 additional attorneys just to adopt the broadest felony standard. Jill, you can take that off the screen. Thank you for sharing. I'll try to answer questions you might have, and I'm certainly available for one-on-one discussions at any point that you want. But I want to leave you with the message. It's important that we have a growth mindset when it comes to funding the public defender offices over the next decade. If the Supreme Court requires this reduction in caseload and we don't have enough attorneys to cover the cases filed by the prosecutor, there will be members of our community unrepresented in violation of their constitutional rights. It is happening now. It will get worse. And I think we would all here agree that that's wrong. It also opens the county to a great deal of liability. So thank you all so much for your time, your commitment to preventing and reducing incarceration. And I hope that I've given you a somewhat of an introduction. It's a very complicated situation adopting this workload study into our local circumstances. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Maya. Raylene, are you speaking to assigned counsel issues?
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Stephen Gockley, and thank you, Maya, because that's very helpful. Some of the information you're going to get is repetitive, but as Maya said, there's less defense attorneys out there. There's less attorneys in law school, and there's a lot of attorneys that have retired. And with COVID, there were no trials, which means the experience needed for public defense for Class A felonies may not be there, as there are certain requirements that they have to meet. And if there were no trials, they couldn't meet those. For example, if we're looking for a persistent offender, life without parole, and needing an attorney, as well as each attorney acting as lead counsel in a 2 strikes or 3 strikes case in which conviction will result in a mandatory sentence of life in prison without a parole, the following requirements must be met: 4 years of criminal trial experience, 1 year experience as a felony defense attorney, and experience as lead counsel, and at least 1 Class A felony trial, and experience as counsel in cases involving the following: mental health issues, sexual offenses, expert witnesses, and 1 year of appellate experience or demonstrated legal writing ability. Currently, this county has less than a handful of attorneys that can actually serve in this capacity. As I might have forgotten to mention, my name is Raylene King. I was the former court administrator for the city of Lane, and I was recently appointed as the county clerk for Superior Court. In taking that role on November 6th, there were 47 unrepresented cases. Currently, we have in district court 12 misdemeanor cases that are unrepresented, 25 Superior Court cases, and 4 juvenile cases. out of those, 4 in Superior Court are in custody without representation, which is a liability to this county, and we need to fix this. I've hit the ground running, trying to assist in getting attorneys to take on these roles. Unfortunately, the judges have started appointing attorneys from the bench, which I can tell you has left a bad taste in the mouth of many attorneys that don't necessarily want to be appointed by the bench to take these roles. Because it also takes away from private hire cases, because even though they're private attorneys, they still are required to meet those caseload standards, and at a significant price that we're not able to pay from what they would get for private hire. So after taking this role, I have talked to the county executive and asked that we change our rates of pay to bring them up. I don't know if they're quite high enough, but starting January 1st, our Class A felonies have gone from $95 an hour to $200 an hour. The other thing that I've requested is that we get rid of the purchase order process so that we can get our invoices out, because I've heard complaints from many attorneys that they weren't getting paid in a timely manner. So talking with finance and the execs off, we're trying to see if we can rectify those situations. And then we still need to entice more attorneys to come to Whatcom County. And as beautiful as this area is, it still costs money to live here. And so we are working hard on trying to figure out how to get more defense attorneys to come to this area. I'm sure there are a lot of questions that you all may have. I don't want to bore you with a lot of numbers, but I can tell you in 2022, under Class B and C felonies, there were 185 cases appointed to assigned counsel. In 2023, Class B and C felonies went to 350. Now, we currently have 1 assigned counsel attorney for conflict cases that are either overflow or conflicts that have came from the public defender's office. And then we would have extended an offer to a 2nd attorney, and we will be posting for a 3rd attorney. That will help with conflicts and overflow. However, if these new case standards are implemented, we may end up needing more attorneys to fill those roles. I think that kind of sums it up. There's a lot of need for defense counsel and to clear out the backlog of cases. And has any questions for Maya or myself, we're willing to try to help. Stephen, I can't hear you.
Stephen, you aren't muted, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, is that?
There you are.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks to both of you for your disturbing presentations. This would be a time for questions to probe deeper in this or for discussion on any role that the task force might like to play in supporting the work to increase public defense. And Dan.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, when you're talking about conflicted cases, are you talking about defendants that have multiple, or they have charges for both parties? Is that what you're saying?
So it could be that there was one case that involved 3 co-defendants. It could be that case has a victim that the county has already represented the victim as a defendant, and now they can't represent them. There's many different reasons. There could be conflict cases as well as overflow cases. Maya, does that sum it up?
Was that your question, Dan? Is what is a conflict?
Yeah, just trying to get some clarity on that one.
Sure.
So I'll ask either of you, is there anything you could see or want the task force to do to support the improvement in this situation?
We definitely need more funding towards public defense. I think that would be one thing that if we could assist or ask legislation for funding in, and then trying to entice attorneys to come to this area would definitely help. And I'm working with a couple of the local attorneys to try to help encourage people, but we definitely need more attorneys in the area.
Yeah, I mean, I and Tom Fryer, who's our assistant chief deputy who supervises district court, go to the law schools and try to participate in, we have an intern program here that we try to like build up some people that could become new staff. We have two individuals who are Rule 9s last summer who are fantastic, who will be taking the bar this summer. Like I know in Snohomish County, they are big enough where they are able to hire a class of law students. So they know they're going to have attrition and they know that they, whatever, so that, you know, they can make offers to law students earlier. You know, we hire here based on the fact that we have an opening. And so, for instance, those two Rule 9 interns who also worked with us their first summer of law school, we've really taught them our system. They're great. They've done worked on trials as Rule 9s. We may or may not be able to hire them because we don't hire prospectively. You know, we only hire when there's a need. I think staying abreast of what happens with the standards for indigent defense, because they are going to change, and then supporting the funding for the attorneys that are needed to provide the level of representation required is really what my ask is. I think that the Wasatch lawsuit it will be interesting to track. I think that I think Kayla from the exec's office is working on legislative priorities, and I know that public defense funding is one of the priorities the county is walking into supporting in the coming legislative year. So, you know, just I think staying abreast and being vocal, watching for these issues and seeing where we can push for more state involvement and funding for public defense. The state provides quite a bit of funding to prosecution of cases, but we get a very, very small amount of state funding, very, very little. It doesn't even, the funds we get through the Office of Public Defense at this point fund maybe an attorney and a half in our office. Everything else is county paid.
I won't be here officially, obviously, but as we go into 2024, I would appreciate it if you two would give us periodic reports on developments of significance in this area, pro and con. And Heather, you have your hand up.
I'm just about to park. Can you hear me okay right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I have 4 questions. The first one is, I'm curious about if we had been fully staffed, or when we get fully staffed for public defense, what will the impact be on the jail population? Will that help reduce the jail population? That would be my guess, but I'm curious for the experts in the room. Would it be 20%? Would it be 50% shorter stays? What would that impact be if the public defense was fully staffed?
I'm thinking about it on so many different levels, Heather. It's a really interesting and complicated question, because when I think, well, if we were fully staffed under the National Workload Study standards, which say we should be devoting 260 hours to a homicide case rather than the 36 that are currently allotted, then would, 260 hours of work is, several months of work. So it's not like, I don't know that, I would imagine that an attorney that had that kind of time to focus and really spend and dive into the homicide case would be prepared to try it a hell of a lot sooner, excuse me, sorry, a lot sooner than we are now. When you've got 70 other cases and you're trying to do all that homicide work, you know, like in the depth that's required on that case, and you're trying to also juggle the fires that are happening on your other 70 cases. I mean, I believe that the system would work at a more rapid pace, and justice would be achieved a lot sooner for everybody if we had the capacity to work at that level with our clients. Right now, we are, I mean, it's like I'm comparing the lead behavioral health specialist to a public defender. I mean, it's crazy. We have 3 times their caseload, but the work is very complex. And but the expectation is public defenders are overworked. You know, it's like sort of just what the stereotype is, and it is not viable any longer. People will not do the work that way any longer. It's not an attractive position to be in. It doesn't feel good to be feeling like you can't provide the level of service you want. And I think it certainly slows the system. I can't give you numbers, but I do think that these are things I would love to work on with a data person. I don't have that capacity.
Heather, on a side note for that, retention of attorneys is kind of huge, because if you have an attorney that's been working a case for several years or several months, and all of a sudden that attorney decides that they don't want to do it anymore and they walk off the job, all of those cases have to be reassigned to another attorney. And so if you've got somebody that's been sitting in jail with an attorney that's been working those cases, and then that attorney leaves, you now have a new attorney that's going to come on and have to go through a lot of the work that may have already been done and kind of start over. So those are also things that if we can not only have enough attorneys to take on a reasonable caseload, we also want to retain the attorneys that are there.
Yeah, and if we see King County, for instance, adopting this 59 caseload limit and, you know, taking progressive steps in advance of coming standard changes, I mean, they do pay more in King County already, as they do in Skagit County. And when these other jurisdictions are lowering caseloads and paying more, it makes it very hard to retain your qualified attorneys.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have so many curiosities. I know we don't have a ton of time. My other curiosities are, does the study also mention at all, or are there other equivalent studies you've seen on the prosecutor workload side and the impact that makes if there's commensurate additional staff on the prosecutor side? I wouldn't expect you to necessarily know that, but that's a curiosity I have and how that could add efficiency to the system. I'm also curious about the state of continuances. I know that was a conversation for a while, and what the system is to support both the public defenders and the prosecutors in knowing when that upcoming court date is and being able to prepare, or if that's really just each lawyer has to manage their own system. And is there support that the community or that the county or nonprofits or I don't know, could help with something? And then my last question is there any space to reimagine? Like, there's workforce issues absolutely everywhere right now, it seems. And I know on the healthcare side, there's been a reimagination of, you know, could we do community health workers with less training that support or different kinds of training that support different kinds of health needs. And it would be interesting to have kind of an imaginative, generative conversation about, well, what's option B if the pipeline for new attorneys is a decade out and the problem is today? Are there any viable option B or C's that we could explore?
All great questions. And I think Eric Ritchie and I have talked in a very surface fashion about what he sees coming for potential studies for prosecutor workloads, and I think he can address that. With continuances, the court is intervening and asking for justifications on continuances of ages of cases of a certain age or older, or if someone's in custody, if they've already been continued once, that case has to be called and consideration is given as to whether that continuance should be granted. But I mean, it comes down to, like, if a public defender said, or any defense attorney says, I can't ethically be prepared for trial because I will be ineffective if I am forced to go to trial because I have not had the time to do the work of the case, the witness interviews haven't been set up, whatever. I mean, those continuances have to be granted. I mean, it's not just, the Constitution doesn't just require that you get a lawyer. You have to have a lawyer that's able to effectively represent you. And so the time that's needed on the cases is the time that's needed on the cases. And it's fluid, and it depends on the lawyer, and it depends on their particular caseload at any given time. Reimagining staff. I mean, I think some time ago, I think we brought Partners for Justice to talk maybe to this group or other groups about, where they embed behavioral health specialists into public defenders' offices and how that can really help. And we have, now we are going to get our third behavioral health specialist, which is, great that we're getting another one. Attorney work is attorney work. Some of it can be delegated, but a lot of it cannot. So I think having programs like we have to build up interns that become lawyers and doing outreach at law schools and stuff like that, I think that's really important to growing the field. I know Eric's got a job opening right now, posting, as do we, and we don't have any applicants for our fourth position that we need to fill yet. It closes on the 26th, so I'm ever optimistic and constantly promoting it. I don't know, Eric, do you want to take the question about prosecutor workload study?
Well, so I could take a lot of, I guess I could present a fair amount of information if people are willing to hear it. I thought I had indicated to Jill Nixon that I was willing to present on how the state of the prosecutor, but apparently I didn't get that email off to Jill. Stephen or Jack, would you like me to present some information?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And Stephen, I think we have time. I believe we have time for it, and I can't think of anything more pressing, and we were really hoping you could. So that sounds great, Prosecutor Ritchie. Perfect.
All right, thank you. I'm happy to thank you, Jack and Stephen. I'm happy to talk about these things, and I'm not happy to complain. It's not really my nature, but it's something that I've been doing lately. Feels like I've been saying it so much that I'm afraid that you've all heard it. So yeah, we asked for a number of positions recently to the county council, and we asked them for a lot of reasons. The main reason is that our caseloads are really high. We're at 186 felonies per felony deputy, and our comparable counties are at 70. And that's just a really, that's a staggering difference. And Maya talked about specialty attorneys, and our person handling sex cases has 150 cases, and our comparable counties, the attorneys have 40. And so that workloads are really at the forefront of the things I'm thinking about. In fact, so much that not only did I go before county council and ask for additional positions, but I also took the same information to WAPA, which is the Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. But first, I'm going to talk about the county council and the administration. When I went and pointed out these numbers to our administration, the administration denied any increases in the prosecutors' staffing. We then went to the county council, and the county council agreed that we needed more people, and they gave us 6 positions total. We got 3 attorneys and 3 staff. That means 3 staff, basically assistants and victim witness. So that was a big change for us, because before then we were at a number of attorneys that was actually one lower than what we had in 2007. What happened? It's complicated. I think we had the housing crisis and .com bust in 2008. We lost some positions, but boy, today we're at a really tough spot at 186 felonies per felony deputy. So anyway, I took this information to WAPA, and WAPA was pretty interested. I asked that we talked about caseloads. I asked that we talked about efficiencies, and we essentially devoted our entire meeting to those two topics. We had a winter meeting about 2 weeks ago, and we brought in an expert to talk about more efficiencies in the prosecutor's office and prosecutor offices and throughout the state. And again, talked about caseloads. Some of the efficiencies that I learned about would be to provide some information to the public defender at time of charging, and that would include the diverting cases, but also what an offer would be, as well as whether or not a person would be admitted into an alternative program such as drug court. And I think we can achieve those things, and that be done through some horizontal prosecution practices. So that means that not every prosecutor has a caseload. We currently have some horizontal prosecution where people are doing some administrative things as opposed to having caseloads. But I think that is part of the efficiencies that we need to explore to make sure that we're doing the best we can for our community. Caseloads was a huge topic for us at WAPA, and we are going to ask that the legislature consider funding a workload study for us, for the prosecutors. We're going to ask that they do that just like they're doing for the public defenders. Not sure that the legislature is going to do that for us. So if that doesn't work out, we're going to be getting together the counties throughout the state and asking for some support from our county councils and do our own study. I don't think that's would be too difficult. I'll tell you the prosecutors throughout the state are all interested in making sure that we have the right number of cases per attorney to make sure that people are doing the work that needs to be done. And so anyway, that's what we're looking at. One way or another, we're going to get a workload study done for prosecutors, and hopefully the state pays for it. But if not, we'll be talking to our county councils. I wanted to bring out one more thing that I thought was really interesting at our WAPA meeting. One of the prosecutors said something that was really interesting, because we're all talking about resolutions. We're all talking about bringing our resolution rates back to where they were pre-COVID. And everybody seems to think that we have this backlog that we can somehow manage. And one prosecutor suggested that we're looking at the new normal. Our resolution rates may never go back to where they were before. And he had some really good reasons for it. And some of them include that jails are not holding people in the same way they used to. And it's not just a Whatcom County thing where we're running against booking restrictions. And that I think you all know that jails and incarceration, that does influence a person to resolve their case. And it just has happened, and it's the way it works. And we don't have that in the same way we used to have it. Also, court appearances. The Supreme Court changed the requirements for people to appear to court, and I don't see them going back. These were COVID restrictions, and I'm not saying that jail or the jail or the booking restrictions or the reduced court appearances are bad or good. I'm just saying it's just kind of the way it is. And so with people not appearing for court, it makes it harder for us to resolve cases. Also, bail jumps. The legislature took away the prosecutor's ability to charge a bail jump for people failing to appear to court. So that's also reducing our ability to make sure that people are accountable for the crimes that they did commit and appear in court. And again, it's a lost tool to force a resolution. Again, I'm not saying it's good or bad, it just is. And we might be looking at a new normal. I also want to point out that Maya's right. We are looking at more complicated cases. These cases with all the digital evidence, the way it has to be processed through the prosecutor, from police to the prosecutor and then to the defense, and looked at all along the way, it means that we're all spending more time on these cases. I think that these difficulties are things that this group should consider when we're talking about public defender numbers as well as prosecutor numbers. It's all related. Will we ever get back to being able to resolve cases the way we used to, even if we increase numbers of prosecutors and public defenders? I don't know. You know, I just don't know. I'm not wanting to point a finger at anybody, saying that somebody's doing something wrong. I think we're just looking at a new normal, and you know, that's going to mean that we're going to have to probably fund more positions to handle these higher and more complicated workloads.
Thank you, Eric. And Maya, if I can circle back to Heather and your question that you had, as Eric Ritchie was mentioning, you know, the jail circumstances, we don't have the same thing that we did. We have a revolving door. We have people that are going into jail and getting released a lot faster than they used to. We don't want to use jail to entice people to plea out, but we're seeing people that probably would have stayed in jail a little bit longer, getting out and committing more crimes and going back into jail. And then we've got the crime that they were originally charged with, and then 3 more counts that are now affecting that individual. So I think that is something that we're dealing with, and I think Caleb can attest to that as he sees the people coming in and out. Pretrial services, you're going to hear a little bit from Stephanie Kraft later on, as she's now in charge of pretrial services for Superior Court, as well as the administrative role. And so Dave Freeman and Stephen Gockley will talk about some of the things that they're working on with pretrial services, and that will definitely, I think, help influence maybe people being able to get to court to try to make sure they know where they're supposed to go. The body cam footage also has an impact, because what a prosecutor and a defense attorney could have looked at just a 10-page report is now 10 hours per deputy or per officer, for 4 officers that appeared on scene, and somebody has to review that. So it takes longer to review paperwork and videos. The legislative mandate is great, because now all those officers out there have those body cams, but we don't have the staffing in the prosecutor's office and in the defense office to be able to go through all of that footage and take that to court. Some of it may eliminate having to go to trial, because you'll see stuff that will either find somebody not guilty or innocent, or maybe they'll just decide that that footage is enough that they need to plead to something. So those things are positive, but we didn't have the funding to take care of that accurately. So I hope that helps. And I see Heather and Jack, and I'll let Stephen take over as the chair, as he should be.
Thanks, Raylene. Heather, you want to follow up?
Yeah, this has been I think a really productive discussion for the task force, and I'm grateful for you all answering some of the questions I posed. Raylene, one thing that I have seen, though, is also, I imagine both things are true, that there have been more book and release and more people committing crimes out of jail that otherwise would have been in the past because of booking restrictions and other factors. But I also think that the state of the jail, who is in the jail and why, it's so important to understand that. It's hard to understand that. And my own analysis has shown that there are long lengths of stay, much longer than historical lengths of stay, and people not resolving their cases. And I have also seen the complexity from my little peripheral view. And then that pretrial rate too, that used to be, 50, 60% were in their pretrial. And now it's closer to 90. It was 98% at one point when we talked about it. And so that's the throughput part and the efficiency part that I'm interested in with additional workforce. But I also really appreciate what Prosecutor Ritchie said about, well, maybe this is the new normal, and how do we adjust expectations and workforce around that too. And that was sort of what I was getting at with that. What is the reimagination opportunity here for the criminal legal justice system? So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Heather. Jack, you're next.
Three quick things. First, I was happy to hear, Raylene, and I'm sure you meant this too, Prosecutor Ritchie, that it's just a fact when people are in jail, they're more likely to settle cases. But I'm glad that's not a primary mechanism to settle, but it is a reality that when you're sitting there in a tank, in a cell, and you get out, that encourages people to settle because they want to leave jail. That's just how it works. Years ago, Wendy always gave me crap about this. I thought we still did it when the task force started. Years ago, if you had fines, you could sit in jail and pay off your fines. And I'm grateful we've moved past that. Yeah, it was 25 a day, pay or stay. That's how it worked. So I'm glad we moved past that. Also, I guess I'm really just interested in, and I'm not looking for feedback today from Prosecutor Ritchie or Maya or anybody else, but communicating with the task force of what we can do as a task force to help resolve this issue, I think is important. So I'd encourage, if you've got ideas, and whether that's letters, talking to county people who are decision-making or whatever, communicate that to steering committee so we can bring it here. Because one of the things I'm left with in this conversation is, what can this task force do? Once we understand some of the problems, you're in the best position probably to have some idea of what would be helpful. I personally think it's a huge issue, and I was extremely well served by the Public Defender's Office. They won an appeals case for me. I think not just the Constitution, but good criminal justice and humanitarianism demands that we have competent advocacy and competent prosecutors as well on all sides. And it's clear the system doesn't have the resources it needs to adequately do the job. I don't know what the answers are, but please feel free to encourage the task force to advocate for what needs to happen, because we're a voice that can do that. And I think that's probably it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. Caleb, you're next up.
Thank you. So I'm Caleb Erickson, Chief Corrections Deputy for the Sheriff's Office. I was just going to point out that the average length of stay and the reason people are in jail is a very complicated issue, like Maya pointed out. And we would be absolutely best served by more resources in the Defender's Office. The cases are more and more complicated. And, anecdotally speaking, when somebody, like Maya points out, when somebody leaves the Defender's Office for one reason or another, and they have very complicated cases that have been pending for a period of time, those all reset. And that will play a large role in some of the individuals who've been in custody for months and months and months, and then sometimes years, is because we've got extremely complicated cases that we've essentially pushed an entire reset button on. And then, as everybody in this room is likely aware, competency is also playing a huge role in how long people are staying in custody. And that is not something that is within the control of anybody here, but it is certainly something that we're experiencing. When you push pause on people's speedy trial and have to pursue competency and restoration, and that process takes a considerable length of time, it adds to the overall length of stay for individuals who are in custody. So there are a lot of things at play, and there's no easy answer in terms of, like, if you add 2 defenders, then we're going to have X number of percentage reduction in jail, because, as we are also aware, there are a lot of people who don't ever even get booked or are booked and released right away in our criminal justice landscape. So there's a number of things that are taking place that we have to address in different ways than we've ever done before. So thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. Eric?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit more about efficiencies. Efficiencies generally mean resolutions. That's what I think we're all talking about. And, you know, I'm getting some folks asking about efficiencies who are outside the legal system. And, you know, frankly, it's a complicated thing. It's complicated for us, and I think it's more complicated for you. You know, I like the idea. I like the idea of looking at data and figuring out where we could do better, and you know what might motivate people. And motivations are really something that you all need to think about. You know, defendants, when they're charged with a crime, they don't want to resolve their cases. They don't have any interest in resolving their cases unless it's like the best deal that's ever been put out for them. And you know, there are reasons for us to be doing that, reasons for us to be putting out plea bargains. But I can tell you that our community would not support the wholesale, prosecutor rolling over on their back and letting people go. That our community would not support that. And you know, we talk about cases and whether or not the prosecutor should be charging certain things. And you know, I would just ask you to think about it. I mean, which cases should the prosecutor not file? I mean, do you want to tell your neighbor that their residential burglary is not worth the prosecutor's time or worth the work done to try to make someone stop doing that behavior? It's a complicated thing. You know, I would invite any of you to come to my office, spend some time with some of the attorneys in my office to understand what kind of things we're facing. Look at our numbers. To help you understand what's going on in the system, help you understand why we're struggling with some of these cases. Again, any of you, if you would like to come in, I have an open door for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Arlene, you're next. You're muted, Arlene. Arlene, you're muted.
I was muted. Anyway, Eric brings up the complexity of the problem, and this is a job for therapy. Yes, you're nodding your head, and at the base of everything, of all crime, well, I won't say all, but the base to most crime is mental health problems, and they should be in the hands of mental health specialists. So if you can add to that group, it would be good. Yes, you're nodding your head. We're you may think that we are therapists, but in a certain way, we're like detectives. We follow the clues and we solve problems, but we don't do it. Our clients do it. We guide the process.
Thank you, Arlene. Other questions, other comments? Okay, I very much appreciate Maya, Raylene, Eric, your giving us this background information, making very clear the urgency of it and the implications of it throughout the process. And I look forward to your keeping the task force informed. Hope people will take up Eric's invitation to dig in a little bit more on this. This obviously affects incarceration prevention and reduction at its core. So thanks again, and we'll continue this conversation, I'm sure. Jack?
Thank you, Stephen. We are on our next agenda item, which is Superior Court pretrial processes. And it's my understanding we're going to have some discussion about this, and then following that, the steering committee had a recommendation that the task force write a letter requesting some assistance. I think Stephen will describe what that is, and when we get to that point, we can discuss that, but I did want you to know this is an action item as well. So Stephen, I think with that, I'll frame it that way and turn it over to you. We can get more specific.
Okay, thank you, Jack. We're going to talk about two things here. I, with help of Judge Freeman, am going to talk about situations in the pretrial processes work group, in particular with our understanding of how well we're doing and evaluating the effectiveness of pretrial risk assessment and tracking the effectiveness of pretrial services. And then Stephanie will talk a little bit about the pretrial services office as well, I hope, and staffing changes and the situation there. So just as background, and I'll invite Judge Freeman to intervene here at any point that he wants. Almost from the outset, the pretrial processes work group was dealing with one of the core Vera Institute report recommendations, which was to consider and adopt and implement an objective pretrial risk assessment instrument in helping.
Stephen,
Yes.
can you increase your volume a little bit?
Yeah, your volume is very low, Stephen. You're about half the volume of anyone else.
Thank you.
I'm really sorry. I've been.
That's better. You speak loud and into the mic. It may work. We've never had this before, so I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't either.
That's better.
I think I got an updated version of Zoom. In any event, so the Vera Institute report recommended the adoption and implementation of a pretrial risk assessment instrument to inform release decisions for the pretrial population. There was a nationwide debate about racial inequities in that because one of the factors of a pretrial risk assessment was evaluating prior criminal history, which had racial biases built into it as well. So the data piece of that became central. We did a lot of study. We were extremely fortunate to have the chief data scientist at the State Administrative Office of the Courts, Dr. Andrew Peterson, volunteer to participate in our work group. He had been the lead data person for the statewide pretrial reform task force. He had worked with other jurisdictions, Spokane, Yakima, King County, Thurston County, and some others since, along with us in looking at pretrial risk assessments. He helped us choose the public safety assessment, which is an open, not a black box kind of algorithmic kind of process. He helped us tweak that according to local needs. He did a pre-implementation validation study using prior cases to see how accurately the public safety assessment would predict risk of reoffense and risk of not appearing for the case if released. In short, Dr. Peterson was really at the core of some of the work we did on pretrial risk assessment. He was prepared, he actually looked at racial inequities in pretrial release decisions, and he was prepared to do post-implementation validation studies to make sure that the tool continued to be as predictive as we wanted it to be, and to make sure that it was at least maintaining, if not improving, our reduction in racial disparities in pretrial release decisions. Unfortunately, recently we got word from his superiors at the Administrative Office of the Courts that they were revising their workloads and assignments, and they were no longer willing to make Dr. Peterson available to the pretrial processes work group as our data consultant. That, as you can tell from that background information, is a significant blow to the progress of that work. Judge Freeman, who's chairing that work group, retired Judge Garrett, who is sort of co-chairing, had been the chair of the group, and I have been putting our heads together for how to sort of recover and regain some data capacity for the work group's work. And we have a couple of possible steps, but the first of which is obviously asking AOC to reconsider its reassignment of Dr. Peterson. He was in the middle of some data crunching for us, which he would not at the moment be able to complete. And he was lined up for especially some of the racial equity analysis that has long been an important part of the task force's mission and the pretrial processes goals. We are intent within the work group to ask for that reconsideration from AOC. In those discussions, Judge Freeman, who has contacts with AOC and is probably the strongest voice for a request for reconsideration, asked or suggested that it would be a much stronger case to make if there were some formal support from the task force for a request that AOC reconsider making Dr. Peterson available to a certain extent to continue with us in our work. And so my part of this presentation is simply to ask, and this comes with the recommendation of the steering committee, ask for a motion that the task force endorse a request to the administrative office of the court to reconsider the availability of Dr. Peterson for our work going forward. I would be glad to answer any questions. I'd invite Judge Freeman to add any information he would like, and otherwise I would ask if there is a motion to support that request.
So moved.
Thank you. Moved by Dan. Is there a second for that?
Second.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch who that was.
It was a tie between Buchanan and King.
Okay. We'll let Jill sort that out. So this would be the time for any discussion and obviously questions as well.
Stephen, 1 second, since we have a motion that's perhaps a little ambiguous. Jill, do you want to work on language or do you want me to while there's discussion? I'd prefer if you don't mind, because you'll get it in a way we need it.
Go right ahead.
Go right ahead. Yeah. Thanks.
I think that was an invitation to you, Jack.
I was under the impression that Stephen was going to create a letter for the task force members to review, but just if the task force wants to simply endorse the chair sending a letter, that's perfectly fine as well.
Yeah, we think it's pretty simple and a very simple ask. So I will put a quick motion together while there's discussion.
Okay. And Jill, just to clarify, that was my goal after our steering committee discussion. I did not get that drafted. Judge Freeman has been really, really busy, and I wanted to run it by him and didn't get a chance to. We're also trying to figure out who exactly at AOC to address this to, and I don't think we're completely clear on the best recipient of this request. So for both of those reasons, we don't have a letter finalized, but the intent is to authorize the creation of such a letter. Other comments, other questions? Jack, how are you doing here?
All right, I think I've got something kind of. So a motion could be moved to ask the administrative office of the court to reconsider making Dr. Peterson available to the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force to continue assisting us in our work.
Okay, Dan, are you okay with that?
Yep.
And Raylene and Barry, can you?
Roger Barry.
Okay, got it.
And Jill, do you have that, or should I send it to you? You got it in the recording?
We got it on the recording. Thank you.
All right, great, thanks.
Okay. So I don't see other hands up for discussion or questions. Would everyone in favor of that motion raise your hand on Zoom or raise your hand on your screen? Okay. You all can lower your hands. Is there anybody who would abstain from this motion? Mike Parker, your hand is still up. Is that okay?
Sorry about that, Steve.
That's okay. Any abstentions? Anyone opposed to the motion? Very well. Thank you, everyone. That motion passes, and Judge Freeman and I and the rest of the work group will proceed to communicate with the Administrative Office of the Courts. Stephanie, do you want to talk about staffing and other work at the Pretrial Services Unit?
Hello, I am Stephanie Kraft. I'm the new Juvenile and Superior Court Administrator. Now overseeing pretrial services. Let's see, we have filled our vacant position with pretrial with Kelsey McDonald. She starts in that capacity on the 22nd of January. Kelsey comes with an extensive background working with juveniles in our detention facility. Alan has transitioned to the pretrial services manager position, and he is currently working on creating additional contacts in the community to be able to refer and support those on pretrial services with engaging in community supports. So that is one of his big projects. He's also doing a little bit of data on some case processing and has gone down and observed another county's pretrial services program to look at how we can continue to evolve pretrial services to better meet the needs of those individuals in the community.
Thank you. I'll just add, I think everybody on the pretrial process work group has been very appreciative of the proactive steps Alan has taken in that manager position and the work he started to do. Judge Freeman, I see your hand up.
I'm going to try to comment. I have unstable internet here. I'm out of the office this week. I just wanted everyone to know that Judge Jones is also assisting with Stephanie and Alan. So if there are questions at all, they can be directed at any of the four of us as well on pretrial services.
Thank you. Any questions for Stephanie or Judge Freeman? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Jack, I'll turn it back to you for other business and public comment.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Do we have, I'm not aware of any other business. Does anyone on the task force have anything that we should have been aware of that I normally ask that at the top of the agenda, but I think we failed to do that. All right, seeing no other business, I believe we move to public comment. And Jill, I'm clicking around to see we have four. Yeah, okay. I will turn this over to you, Jill, to please administer our public comment.
Thank you. Right quick before we go to public comment, Arlene, if you don't mind staying after, I've got a couple questions for you. Yes, we do have some attendees at the meeting today, one with his hand raised. Jason, go ahead and speak to the task force.
Hey, good morning, folks. Jason DeForest, local business owner here. Got a couple of things to say. Eric, if violating constitutional rights is the new normal, then we probably need a new prosecutor, a new constitution, and maybe even a new God, because I'm pretty sure he was the one protecting those rights. People talk, lawyers talk. It's hard to entice anyone to join a culture that is so toxic. Less attorneys isn't so much the problem, I think, as it is a charging problem on the front end and a cultural problem. What we need to do is eliminate overcharging, false charging, and entrapment. If our county is so high in charges in comparison to other counties, and they're double the rate that we are, then we need to take a look at what their police are doing different. It comes full circle again to police accountability and healthcare worker accountability. The prosecutor can also choose to hold these charges to a higher charging standard and not allow things like police misconduct to go unaccounted for. I think, again, folks, what you're talking about is a cultural problem. And the only way that that resolves itself is when people in charge start taking responsibility for their actions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to speak, please virtually raise your hand now by selecting the raise hand icon. If there's anyone attending in our council conference room, the video is turned off, so I can't see if anyone's there. Please enable the video and let us know that you're here. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the task force?
And Jill, the conference room, for some reason I see it. It appears to be empty.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. And I don't have any other hands raised.
All right, then I think what I'm going to say is it's December 18th, and I wish all of you, however you might spend the next few weeks, many of you celebrating different things, that it's a restful, pleasant, not too stressful period of time. Thank you for all your efforts this year, and we look forward to seeing you in January 2024, and a special welcome to the people who haven't been here before. We appreciate having you. And with that, Mike, do you have a new baby?
No new baby. I got a 5-year-old heading to 4, but
okay, all right, okay. I was going to acknowledge I got confused on that. All right, okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great holiday week, good December, and see you in January. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.